All right, so today we're going to learn about alliteration. So alliteration is the repetition of the same sound or letter at the beginning of each or most of the words in a sentence or a line. So the easiest way to think about using alliteration would be repeating the starting letter of the words. And so we think about it here with this example: squawking seagulls swoop on steak. We get that repeating S sound. The little seagull swooping in on some leftover food. Or excited Everett 8th graders enter high school expecting to earn an exemplary education. So we got lots of E action happening there. So that is an example of what alliteration is. And so we think about, why do writers use alliteration? So poets and writers, they use alliteration to focus your attention on certain parts of their poem or writing, including the lines and words. And so alliteration creates kind of a rhythm and mood. So if we think about a couple different examples, if we think about alliteration here at this top example on the right, it's from a famous poem called The Raven by a famous poet, Edgar Allan Poe. He's known for writing kind of scary, very kind of like horror-themed poems. And so his beginning of the poem goes, "While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping." And so he's got some rhyme happening there too, but he's kind of lulling you into this sense of like, oh, you're taking a little bit of a nap, you're going to sleep. It's kind of a calm, lulling N sound that you see, and it's highlighted in red in this example here. And then we think about too the rhythm and mood that it creates. It might just be kind of lulling you into this sleepy feeling, which you're then jarred by this tapping that you hear. The rhythm and mood could be different too. It could be sadness or joy or concern or maybe even hilarity. So we look at this bottom example on the right by Shel Silverstein. Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. And so again, we hear rhymes, but we also see alliteration with Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout. So we have this kind of like funny long name that's got this repeated S sound happening at the beginning of each of the words in the first line. And so we're getting into like sort of a silly comedic poem, and he's creating that comedic effect, that funny effect, by using that repeating S sound of S along with the rhyme. It makes it kind of a funny way to like start this poem about this girl who's just not taking the garbage out. It's filling the can, covering the floor, rolling down the hall. So there's lots of different reasons we might use alliteration, but it really should contribute to the mood and kind of the rhythm of the poem. And so here's some other examples of how you might use alliteration. And so softer sounds like H or L, so like or ul, might create a more romantic or sensitive mood or tone in your poem, while the use of harder sounds like k, which might suggest like a harsher tone. And so if we think about a couple examples here, the chilling cold almost chopped him apart. And so we're getting a real sense here with both the words and the alliteration sound of a ch or a k. And so it's kind of goes with the words themselves, giving this feeling of like real coldness and kind of a harsh setting, making you feel like almost like uncomfortable. And so the writer's doing that by using this alliteration with the ch and k sounds. If we think about the bottom few lines, this is actually from a speech by Martin Luther King Jr. And so it's not even a poem, it's a speech though. It's a very famous one and powerful one. Listen to how he uses alliteration here. 50 years ago, a great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So he's using that alliteration with his words to kind of get us into the rhythm of what he's saying. He's kind of trying to draw us in this important message, using not only powerful words, but also alliteration in the words that he chooses. So again, like a really thoughtful way to kind of grab the reader's or listener's attention in this case. And so you might be thinking now, like, how am I going to use alliteration? You know, I'm thinking that to myself too. And so I think a few ways to think about it are by adding or changing words in a poem you already have. So at least 3 words in one of your stanzas, and that's a group of usually about 4 lines, have the same beginning sound. You can do that as easily as just changing a letter. Maybe swap in a word or two that starts with that same repeating beginning sound. And then think about picking a sound for alliteration that adds or builds to the mood and tone of your poem. So build in some sounds that kind of reflect whether your poem is supposed to be happy, whether it's supposed to be a sad poem, or one of frustration or anger. So think about how the rhythm you're creating with alliteration can really sort of tie into the message and mood and tone of your poem. And so I'm going to show you an example of mine. And so I was thinking about my hometown, which is in Florida, and I'm writing a poem that kind of reflects my experience of growing up there. And so a big part of growing up in Florida involved going to the beach, of course, and hanging out in the sun. So it was very sunny, and I would like often get sunburns, and those were super painful. I don't know if you've ever had one. They really hurt, especially when your skin turns red and then they start to peel. It's like very uncomfortable. And so I wanted to kind of create that feeling of what that feels like. And so I went in and I wrote, there is water, palm trees, sand, and sun. So much sun and burns too. From when I used to play outside all day. And then this line here, skin singed by rays, sharp as glass. And so I really was thinking about how can I show like how much that it hurts and that image of what it feels like to get a sunburn. And so I thought about skin, and then I thought about a word that kind of went along with like what it means to get like really fried by the sun. And so singed is a word that describes getting like burnt, right? And so I repeated that S sound of s. Skin singed by rays, sharp as glass. So I have the repeating S sound there to kind of give you that like sound of like a sizzle, right? When you hear like something heating up on the pan on the stovetop, that sizzle sound of like something burning. So that kind of goes with my whole theme here of trying to get the reader to feel and sense what it would have been like to get like a sunburn where the sun is literally singeing your skin. And so that's an example of how I used it in my poem. There's lots of different ways you can choose to do it in yours. I'm going to leave you here with one last piece of inspiration. It's a great song by Black Alicia's called The Alphabet Aerobic. So listen up and watch for some examples of how you might use alliteration in your poems.
Now it's time for our wrap-up. Let's give it everything we've got. Ready? Begin.
Artificial amateurs aren't it all amazing? Analytically, I assault, animate things. Broken barriers bounded by the bomb beat. Buildings are broken, basically I'm bombarding. Casually create catastrophes, casualties, canceling cats got the canopies collapsing. Detonate a diamond tank daily doing dope. Demonstrations, Don Dada on the down low. Eating other editors with each and every energetic, epileptic episode, elevated etiquette. Furious, fat, fabulous, fantastic. Flurries of funk felt feeding the fanatics. Gift got great, global goods gone glorious. Getting godly in this game with the glorious. Hit 'em high, hella hype, historic. Oh, hey, Holocaust hymns, hear 'em holler at your homeboy. Imitators idolize, I intimidate. In an instant, I'll rise in an irate state. Juiced on my jams like Jerry Curls, chalking joints justly. It's just me writing my journals. Kindly, I'm kindling all kinds of King Kong. Karate kick type Brits in my kingdom. Let me live a long life, lyrically. Lessons is learn, lame louses just lose to my leverage. My mind makes marvelous moves, masses. Marvel and movement, he mock what I've mastered. Niggas nap knowing I'm nice naturally. Knack never lack, make noise nationally. Operation opposition off, not optional. Out of sight, out of mind, widening opticals. Perfected poems, powerful punchlines, crumbling, petty powder puffs in my prime. Quite quaint posts, keep quiet as quantum. Quarrelers ain't got a quarter of what we gotta. Really raw raps, rising up rapidly, riding the rushing radio activity. Super scientifical, sound search thought. Silencing superfly saps that are soft. Tails 10 times talented, too tough. Take that, challengers, get a tune up. Universal, unique, untouched, unadulterated, the raw, uncut. Verb by smart, victorious, valid. Violate vibes that are vain, make them vanish. While I'm all well, what a wise wordsmith. Just weaving up words, weeded up on my work shift. Xerox, my X-radiation grows extra large, X-height letters, and xylophone tones. Yellowback, yak mouth, young ones yawn. Yesterday's lawn yard, sell I yawn. Zigzag zombie, zoom into the zenith. Zero wins and thoughts, overzealous rhymes, Z-lots.